and welcome to Business Daily. I'm Lee-Jun in Seoul. Let's get started with a look at today's highlights. Korea's June consumer sentiment soars to a 6.5-year high on the back of rising exports and growing hopes over the Moon administration's job creation policies. What's ahead for the Korea-US FTA as President Moon Jae-in meets with U.S. President Donald Trump later this week? We'll sit down with an expert to talk about this. We begin with a look at how the markets fared on this Tuesday. For a closer look, we have our Eunice Kim joining us on the phone. So Eunice, the benchmark Kospi continued its fierce rally as it logged yet another intraday high.
That's right, June. The Kospi has been flirting with the 2,400 mark all day following yesterday's all-time closing high of 2388.66. At the closing bell, the benchmark Kospi wrapped up at 2391.95, up 14 basis points. Unlike Monday, the tech-heavy Kosdaq also ended on an upbeat note at 672.63. On the currency counter, the Korean won strengthened, ending at 1136.91 against the greenback. Earlier in the afternoon, the Kospi had risen as high as 2397.14 on the back of aggressive buying by retail investors who snatched up a net 221 billion won worth of stocks, while foreigners and institutions lifted the Kosdaq. SK Hynix, number 2 on the main bourse by market cap, logged yet another 52-week high for a 7-day winning streak on optimism over its bid on Toshiba's chip business. LG Display rose nearly 5% during the trading day on expectations of a strong Q2 performance. The bullishness also comes as the Bank of Korea reported the country's composite consumer sentiment index hit a 77-month high in June, buoyed by a still red-hot property market and hopes tied to the new Moon Jae-in government. This has been Eunice Kim for Business Daily.
Are the good times coming back for the Korean economy? The country's consumer sentiment index improved for the 5th month in a row in June, and in the process hit a record high not seen in several years. Our Kim Hae-sung reports.
The Bank of Korea said Tuesday that Korea's composite consumer sentiment index hit a 6.5-year high, recording 111.1 in June. The last time it hit those heights was in January 2011. A reading over 100 means there are more consumers who expect economic conditions to improve in the coming months than those who expect them to get worse. Most sub-indices for June also showed improvement. Households' perception on current economic conditions and future economic conditions in June hit 93 and 112 respectively, recording the highest level since 2010. Expectations for future job opportunities also rose, recording 121.
Expectations about the Moon administration's supplementary budget and job creation policies played a part in the rising consumer sentiment index. In addition, a steady rise in exports and stock prices this year and the removal of political uncertainties early this year have driven the stronger sentiment we've seen over the past several months.
Exports and the Consumer Sentiment Index, a leading economic indicator, are showing signs of improvement. But with domestic demand mostly coming from construction investment rather than private consumption, experts say only time will tell if domestic consumption picks up in the months ahead. Kim Hae-sung, Business Daily.
Korea's trade ministry and the country's leading trade association said 15 cases of import restrictions on Korean products were reported from abroad in the second quarter, compared to 3 in the first quarter. Now, this is according to data released earlier today by the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy and the Korea International Trade Association. The restrictions include safeguards and anti-dumping restrictions targeting Korean products. With concerns that the 5-fold increase in restrictions may negatively affect exports in the second quarter and beyond, the Korean government is preparing countermeasures against non-tariff barriers by conducting a legal study to see if any violations had occurred and how other countries have fared in similar situations. Just days before the Korea-U.S. summit, President Trump's U.S. trade representative says Washington has no plans to scrap the Korea-U.S. FTA, in what would seem to be a contradiction of his boss. Our Shin Se-min reports.
No change to the Korea-US FTA deal. This coming from President Trump's top trade negotiator, Robert Lighthizer. During a two-day Capitol Hill hearing where the USTR's budget for 2018 was discussed, he said the administration has no plans to scrap the free trade agreement between Seoul and Washington. Lighthizer said that while the U.S. is expected to see another trade deficit under the deal, there should be ways to resolve the trade imbalance with Seoul, which enjoys a surplus worth some 20 to 30 billion US dollars. Just this April, Washington tripled its anti-dumping duties on Korea-made oil country tubular goods, raising them to 24.9%. President Trump had in his campaign and after taking office denounced the Korea-US FTA deal, calling it a job killer and a disaster, promising to either fix or scrap it. He pointed to America's massive trade deficit with Korea, which he said amounts to 28 billion US dollars. In his first days in office, he pulled the U.S. out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, a 12-nation free trade deal, and has threatened to quit the North American Free Trade Agreement. With Trump's top trade official apparently contradicting the president himself, there's a big question over Washington's definitive stance on whether or not to fix or scrap the 5-year-old deal, and many local traders in Korea will be hoping for some answers. Shin Se-min, Business Daily.
And a recent report released on Monday by the Washington office of the Korea Trade Investment Promotion Agency says the Korea-US FTA will likely undergo some revisions instead of being completely overhauled. The report says the updated version is expected to contain new clauses on a number of issues, including digital trade and regulations on currency manipulation. It adds the revision aims to bring the FTA up to date on new forms of trade, as well as devising ways to tighten enforcement of existing regulations. The Korea-US FTA came into effect in March of 2012. With President Moon Jae-in scheduled to fly over to the United States later this week, eyes are set on what economic issues will be on the table for discussion when he meets U.S. President Donald Trump for the first time since taking office. Let's take a closer look.
The first bilateral summit between President Moon Jae-in and President Donald Trump is set to take place in Washington on June 29th and the 30th. There, the two are expected to discuss various issues including North Korea's nuclear threat, the deployment of the anti-missile defense system THAAD on the Korean peninsula, and a possible renegotiation of the Korea-US free trade deal. Analysts say President Moon has a lot on his shoulders, as the summit is being considered a litmus test of the Moon administration's foreign policy agenda, and it's likely to set the tone of the Korea-US alliance under the two new leaders. So what can we expect at the upcoming summit, and will President Moon be able to narrow the differences between the two countries?
And to tell us more about this, Professor Yang Jun-seok from the Catholic University of Korea joins us in the studio today. Welcome, Professor.
Happy to be here.
All right, so analysts have been saying that President Moon's visit to Washington will be a tough one, especially when the two countries both underwent a leadership change in the first half of this year. So what are your thoughts on this?
Okay, well, the two biggest issues is definitely going to be the North Korea THAAD issue and the economic issues especially with the Korea-US FTA. But personally, I can't help but wonder whether this is too soon. The Moon administration came into power less than 2 months ago, and they did it without a transition team, so their policies are not yet set. Some of their major players in the economic policy area is not yet set, so I'm somewhat worried that this is perhaps too early.
Now, I know you mentioned it a little bit earlier, but of course the most important one up for discussion would be the Korea-US FTA. But what are some of the other economic issues that will be up for discussion?
Okay, well, some of the economic issues would probably be economic cooperation, especially since President Trump has a vastly different vision of what the global economy should be, and whether Korea should go along with that vision or how much should it go along. And then there's the economic cooperation issue. Trump wants more jobs for the Americans, and he wants to have Korean cooperation in doing it. Again, how much will Korea follow that point of view? All these points will be discussion, and they'll also affect how Korea's FTA will be either revised or canceled, withdrawn, or so on.
So, I mean, President Trump has actually vowed to revise or scrap this deal before. So what kind of stance can we expect from him during the summit?
Okay, well, I think he'll take a somewhat of a hard position, but it really depends on what kind of personal relationship those two develop. Now, President Trump has asked the Treasury Department and the USTR to prepare reports on American trade deficit and what of the existing trade agreements that needs to be changed. But President Trump hasn't always been taking advice from his advisors.
Right.
And so much seems to depend on just personal relationship. So if President Moon and President Trump hits it off, like perhaps he did with Japan's Abe or Chinese Premier's Xi Jinping, then they may actually get along very well, and the Korea-US FTA may not change very much. But if it takes a more adversarial position like he did with Germans, Angela Merkel, then perhaps the position on Korea-US FTA will be tougher. So we'll need to look at how that relationship develops. As far as the Korea-US FTA goes, at least I think the technocrats' point of view is that Korea-US FTA doesn't really need to be changed that much because, well, when the USTR negotiated the TPP agreement, they used the Korea-US FTA as a base for negotiations. And when USTR Lighthizer submitted to Congress what he wanted to change in NAFTA agreement, he pointed out things that were in the TPP agreement, which were in turn mostly in Korea-US FTA. So as mentioned in the previous report, they'll probably deal with some things in the TPP that were not in the Korea-US FTA, and there'll probably have to be some political consideration as well. A lot of Trump supporters are not happy that Korea has such a big trade surplus, especially in certain areas. So there'll probably be some type of side letters dealing with Korean exports of automobiles and steel to the United States, and Korean imports in, say, legal services, financial services, agricultural products, and automobiles, but those are probably going to be in the side letter. At least that's my best guess currently.
Now, but ahead of the summit, Korea has been stepping up efforts to reduce the trade imbalance between the two countries. So what were some of those efforts? Okay, well, in the past, and this problem has been around since the 1980s, Korea has taken measures to ease some of the technical restrictions on popular American products. Agricultural products and automobiles are two items that come up most often, and Korea has sometimes offered to restrict exports in some areas, and also Korea has gone on these buying expeditions from the United States in the past, presidents going along with businessmen trying to find out whether there's good purchases to be made in the United States or good investment opportunities. So that's what's probably going to happen here also. Now, CEOs and business leaders from some of Korea's top conglomerates are traveling alongside President Moon Jae-in to his trip to the U.S. So what kind of role can we expect them to play? Okay, I think the hope of the Korean government and the Korean business sector is that these businessmen will have enough sort of presence to the United States and the Trump administration to make President Trump happy enough so that any adverse effect to Korea's FTA or military relationship or economic relationship between the two countries get better, or at least the adverse effects minimized. So I think there's some reports, it's not definite, but there's some reports that Samsung and LG are going to make major investments, direct investment in the United States. Korea Gas Corporation is looking to buy American shale oil and so on. If these appease President Trump, that's fine. But my concern is that, well, perhaps President Trump will just say thank you, and then when it comes to Korea-US FTA, just go along with his original path, because the
President Trump's domestic economic agenda is pretty much stuck. He wanted tax cuts, and that's having difficulties. He wanted to overturn Obamacare, that's hitting difficulties. And he wanted to build wall between U.S. and Mexico, and that's hitting difficulties. So the only area that he can really show his supporters that he's doing what he promised is actually in the area of trade. So I'm wondering if these presents that these businessmen are carrying to the United States are going to be enough.
Now, with that in mind, in your opinion, what should be done to make sure that the summit actually bears some fruit?
Okay, well, the most important thing, as I mentioned earlier, is building good personal relationship between Trump and Moon. And we are carrying some carrots for American people and Trump administration. But I also think that we should prepare some sticks to go along with the carrot. Obviously, we don't need to make the stick publicize it too much, but there are some things that Korea can use and that could actually be non-beneficial to the United States. For example, Korea is the largest beef market for American beef outside of the United States. But if United States withdraws from Korea's FTA, then that leaves Australia and New Zealand as FTA partners, and they're major exporters of beef. Also, there's been some studies by KIET saying that if Korea's FTA is withdrawn, both countries will be worse off because there's going to be less trade, but the trade deficit for the United States will actually increase.
Okay.
And then there's a lot of worries about currency manipulation and dollar too high value for the dollar, but some of that is due because American investors are investing a lot, especially in the short term in Korea. So that's driving up the rates, and Korea's maintaining a lot of U.S. dollar reserves because they're afraid that these funds will flow out very quickly. So perhaps Korea can say that if Trump administration is so worried about currency manipulation, then perhaps one way of dealing with it is have some short-term capital flow controls. And the United States may not exactly welcome that either. So we should prepare some sticks to go along with the carrot.
Yeah, all right. Well, for now, we'll keep our eyes on the summit itself. Thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you.
Smooth sailing for the Moon Jae-in government's nominee for tax chief. The National Assembly this afternoon adopted the confirmation hearing report for National Tax Service Commissioner-designate Han Seung-hee 1 day after his hearing. Previously serving as the head of the tax agency's Seoul office, Han is regarded as an expert in tax investigation. During his parliamentary hearing, he told lawmakers that if confirmed, he'd deal sternly with any tax dodgers, including tycoons who try to sidestep gift or inheritance taxes. The Seoul National University graduate also said he'd employ various future-facing methods, including big data analysis, to run the agency. Samsung's Galaxy S8 Plus is set to have the best performing battery compared to its rivals currently on the market. This is according to U.S. Consumer Reports on Tuesday, which says the handset released earlier this year had the longest battery life compared to other handsets, allowing users to make calls for 26 consecutive hours. It noted that the device's wireless charging function is an extra bonus and that it can run long-term evolution data for up to 17.5 hours. Meanwhile, Samsung's Galaxy S7 Edge also grabbed second place as it allows users to make calls for 24 consecutive hours. In the era of ethical consumption, many of us now ask ourselves before buying something new, how do we use our consumer dollars most effectively to balance pleasure with purpose? Our Lee Joo-young tells us more.
Half the world lives on less than $2.50 a day. That's over 3 billion people. Roughly 1.1 billion do not have access to clean water, while some 2.6 billion lack basic sanitation. While the sheer scale of global poverty appears overwhelming, companies have fully embraced the concept of doing well while doing good, or cause-related marketing, that has emerged as the primary way businesses engage in social responsibility.
The ideal company now is not one that solely focuses on maximizing profit, but one that gives back to society as well. Those firms are much more valued by consumers. And as an increasing number of companies seek to build a good corporate image, more firms are expected to participate in cause marketing.
One company that's set on raising awareness of the ongoing water crisis in Uganda is social enterprise Jerrybag.
Women and children have to carry heavy water bottles and walk on dangerous roads several times a day just to have enough water to live. As we were thinking about a way to solve this problem, we came up with Jerrybag, a bag that can carry jerry cans. We don't think this is the perfect solution, but because the situation is so bad right now, I think this is good enough to provide at least some measure of relief.
The award-winning product incorporates standard African cotton and patterns like kitenge to appeal to overseas customers. For every purchase of a Jerrybag, this backpack, called a 1+ bag, is donated to a child or a woman in Uganda, enough for 100 liters of drinkable water for locals. It doubles as a school bag as well and has a light reflector at the bottom, making it safe for locals during night hours. Roughly 800 1+ bags have been delivered to locals so far, and an additional 1,200 is set to be distributed this year. If passion to end the water crisis in Africa gave birth to Jerrybag, a desire to improve lighting conditions in developing countries gave birth to Lemire. After experiencing blackouts during a trip to India, CEO Park Jae-hwan launched a social enterprise in 2014 and developed these lamps, the Lemire C and the Lemire K, that converts heat into brighter electrical light.
불을 붙여주고 이 램프를 올려놓으면 되는데요. 초에서 90%가 다 열로 버려져요. 그렇다 보니까 저희는 그 90% 열을 회수하는 개념인데.
Until now, its Lemire C products have been marketed to developed countries for about $90. Profits on the Lemire C was used to develop the Lemire K, which is set to launch in September in developing countries like Indonesia for a lower cost of roughly $20. Lemire believes the lamps will be of help to Southeast Asian countries and that it's willing to cooperate with other firms that have better solutions to lighting.
정말 훌륭한 사람들이 많잖아요.
There are a lot of amazing entrepreneurs, but I don't really think they're very interested in the social sector. But what I wanted to show them is that it is possible to generate profit while addressing social issues, although the process may be slower. Simply praising the sector will not attract people with technology to join such ventures. But if there are more successful cases, then it's only natural that people will be more interested.
While the purpose of cause marketing isn't so much on profit-making, it can greatly influence a company's profitability, a reason why many large firms are also actively participating in this business strategy. For instance, the India office of LG Electronics recorded profits of $1.2 billion in the first half of last year, up about 100% on year after launching a campaign that aims to reduce food waste. Sales of Samsung products in Africa have also been on an upward trend every year since 2013, after its initiative to help facilitate the growth and development of Africa's education sector. With an increasing number of people striving to create a better world, companies are expected to strengthen its cause marketing initiatives and catch two birds with one stone in the process. Lee Ju-young, Business Daily.
And that wraps it up for today. Thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow with more at the same time, same place for your Business Daily. Until then, goodbye.